Hello all. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful thoughts and emotions recollected in tranquility, said a popular English poet. But our ancestors knew this before 3000 years, and that is why they chose the genre of poetry to express their thoughts and emotions. Sangam literature produced works that were poetic in form. Probably the form allowed people to freely express their intricate emotions. Poetry does that. It gives a free rein to drive emotions into words. No critic could comment on the type of vocabulary or form of expression in poetry, since it usually will be personal in tone. And based on the length of the poems and their forms, works of Sangam literature were split into two. Patthupaatu, that is 10 long poems, and 8 Tohai, 8 anthologies or collections of poetry. People of Sangam era understood their lives with the help of two major concepts. One is Agam, which is internal, and the other one is Puram, which is external. Concepts that were either private, pertaining to an individual alone, or personal, involving two emotionally bonded people, were categorized under Agam genre. The works that spoke about love, lust, emotional turmoil, depressions, ecstasy, bliss, extreme devotion, inexplicable emotions of human beings were called Agam works. Concepts that spoke about environment, a particular person's unique traits like generosity, bravery, and so on, particular kingdom or region of great influence, society in general, and those emotions that which can be expressed to an audience and be understood were categorized under Puram work. The Agam works in the 10 long poems or Patthupaatu are Mullai Paatu, Paatu, Pattinapalai, and Nedunalvadai. These poems talked about subtle human emotions that could only be felt or experienced. The Agam works mostly are linked with the landscape in which the action usually took place. And in Sangam literature, the major landscapes were Mullai, that is forest lands, Marudam, farmlands, Kurinji, hilly regions, Nedal, seashore, and Palai, dry lands. Each of these areas had their specialized sect of people, practices, food styles, lifestyles, flora and fauna, and even gods and goddesses. These landscapes were called Thinai in Tamil, and the word Thinai literally means demeanor, conduct, behavior, or discipline. The poem that we are going to deal with today is Mullai Paatu, or the rhyme of the rainforests. Mullai is the area which has dense forests. The people of Mullai primarily worshipped Lord Vishnu. The people were split into Kurumbore Nadan, or the head of natives, the clan that established a territory in the landscape right from the beginning, and the working class, including Ayar or cattle rearers and Idayar or shepherds. The forests of Mullai had wild fowls, deers, hares, jasmine bushes, kaya trees, and other exotic varieties of trees, herbs, and plants. The people of Mullai had millets like pearl millet, foxtail millets as their staple food. They also had tunes which were native to their landscape. Mullai Paatu, or the Mullai Pan, also called Sadari Pan, is a collection of songs that were composed in the raga named Bandhuvarali, and these songs were sung with the accompaniment of Mullai Yal, or the forest lute. The landscape of Mullai is often tagged with adjectives related to existence and survival, and most often the women folks would merely survive after their spouses leave for battlefronts. They would physically survive for the sake of it until their beloved returned. The poem of discussion today, Mullai Paatu, also talks about the pains of surviving endured by the wife of a soldier who has gone to the battlefront. Though it is not mentioned, scholars say that the main character of Mullai Paatu might be King Nedunjarian of the Pandya kingdom. The poem is sung from his queen's view and later shifts to the king's view. The poem is written by Napputanar, supposedly the son of a gold trader who lived in the city of Pugar or Kaveri Pugmattina. The poem begins on a rainy day. Rains are synonymous with forests, that is, Mullai lands, so the majority of the days in a year are spent in cold and wet rains. The first few lines of the poem clearly highlights the settings of the poem and then goes on to the elaborate central theme. Mullai Paatu, the rhyme of the rainforests. Mal pola thondrum மழை மேகம் நனந்தலை உலகம் வழியே நேமியோடு வலம்புரி பொறித்த மா தாங்கு தடக்கை நீர் செல நிமிர்ந்த மா அல் போல பாடு இமிழ் பனிக்கடல் பருகி வலன் ஏற்பு கோடு கொண்டு எழுந்த கொடுஞ்செலவு எழிலி பெரும் பெயல் பொழிந்த சிறு பொன் மாலை dark clouds like the dark skin protector. The world cocooned by him with love, with his robust arms that hold the divine conch. Much like him, the dark and heavy clouds that sponged up the deep water from the right rose up and above in his giant form and showered to wet the beings on that short dusk. The poet begins with the beautifully interlaced lines that talk about the god of the Mullai lands, Lord Vishnu, the typical climate of the land's constant monsoons and the typically short evenings. He says that just like how Lord Vishnu took the avatar of Vaman and presented his Vishwaroop or gigantic form to King Mahabali, the scattered clouds in the sky gathered together and sponged up more waters from the oceans to bring heavy rains. Due to the rains, the entire land seemed to face a very short evening because soon it turned dark again. The poet symbolically states, just like the monsoon that never lets people have a normal day, the constant sorrow that lingers in the mind of a woman whose husband was away to the battlefront never lets her live in peace. The poet moves ahead to introduce other features. We shall move ahead with the poem. Mudupendir Virichi Ketal Arungadi Mudur Marungil Pohi Yal Isai Ina Vandu Arpa Nilvodu நாழி கொண்ட நறுவி முல்லை அரும்பு அவள் அலறி தூஉய கைத்தொழுது பெருமுது பெண்டிர் விரிச்சி நிற்ப. As the older women wait for good words, enter the heavily guarded fort of the ancient town, where even bees buzz like the sweetest harps, measures of paddy wafting aroma, along with slender buds of jasmine strewn, and prayed as the elder women await words of auspicion. Here the poet gives an introduction to the ancient custom that women of Mullai lands followed. The older women in the land used to take measures of paddy and freshly plucked jasmine flowers to pray to the village god. They believed one of the older women would get the godly frenzy and will predict the fates of men who are away to fight in the battlefront. This is one of the practices that is still followed in several places. While there are genuinely God-fearing people who get true frenzy and speak good words to ease the difficulties of people, there are several who fake the same to hoard money. Well, let us not get into those controversial subjects. We shall move ahead with the poem. Mudupendir ஆய் மகளின் நற்சொல் கேட்டலும் தலைவியை ஆற்றுவித்தலும் சிறு தாம்பு தொடுத்த பசலைக் கன்றின் உருதுயர் அலர்மலர் நோக்கி ஆய்மகள் நடுங்கு சுவல் அசைத்த கையள் கையக் கொடுங்கோள் கோவலர் பின்னின்று உய்தர இன்னே வருகுவர் தாயர் என்போன் நன்னர் நன்மொழி கேட்டனம் அதனால் நல்ல நல்லோர் வாய்ப்புள் தெவ்வர் முனை கவர்ந்து கொண்ட திரையர் வினை முடித்து வருதல் தலைவர் வாய்வது நீ நின் பருவரல் எவ்வம் களைமாயோய் எனக் காட்டவும் காட்டவும் காணாள் கலல் சிறந்து பூப்போல் உன் கண் புலம்பு முத்து உரைப்ப. Elder women seek predictions and convey the same, like the melancholic young calf fastened by spindly rope. Viewed as the most distressed one, the lady of the herders with shuddering shoulders and tied up arms. Arms that hold the spears, herders who throw from the back line. Now will your mothers too come, she said. All those good words we listen, and so good and good people and goodness from those lands of vanquished foes, the herders post-war, will they come with the king? It's true. Leave thy fear and doubts, O beautiful dusky dame. Not these words did give her solace, dejected was she, with her lined eyes dripping pearly tears. Here the poet describes how the women were huddled in front of the village goddess's shrine, and just when they were expecting some good omens, from a nearby hut they heard the lady cowherd pacifying a young calf she had. The lady was telling the young calf that it need not worry, as its mother would be arriving any time then. The elder women found these words very soothing and truly positive, so they carry this to the young queen who is drenched in sorrow. The queen listens to the words of the elders, but her mind does not get pacified. She feels further sorrowed thinking of her king who is away fighting deadly enemies in the battlefield. The extreme sorrow builds pearly like tears in her eyes, but stays there as she is grieved beyond tears. The big wait. How painful it is to wait for the one we love, waiting for a reunion, gripped with unknown fears and doubts if the person would come back at all, with prayers that the person should be safe and sound. We shall move further into the poem and see what happens. பாசறை அமைத்தல் கான் யாறு தழிய அகல் நெடும் புறவில் சேன் நாறு பிடவமுடு பைம்புதல் எருக்கி வேட்டுப்புழைய அருப்பம் மாட்டிக் காட்ட இடுமுள் புரிசை ஏமுறு வழையிற் படுநீர் புனரியின் பரந்த பாடி. The battle camp. In the deep jungle surrounded by wild river, far spread fragrance of wild jasmines from the cleared bushes, narrow paths of hunters destroyed and widened, fenced with tall thorny twigs to guard, the battle camp set wide and roaring like the ocean waters. The scene suddenly shifts from the town of Mullai land into a forest. The poet takes us to the battle camp of the hero who's leading his troop. He describes the forest as a very vast one and is surrounded by fast-flowing river in the wild. He explains how soldiers cleared off several bushes of jasmines to widen the path for their troop to enter the heart of the jungle. There are more plants and bushes cleared to set their camps, and after tents were put up, the campsite was fenced with thorny sticks from the wild plants in the forest. The poet describes that the campsite resembled the wide ocean with roaring waves, since it was full of soldiers chatting among themselves. பாசறையின் நாற்சந்தியில் நிற்கும் யானையின் நிலை. உவலை கூரையொழுகிய தெருவில் கவலை முற்றம் காவல் நின்ற தேம்படு கவிழ சிறு கண் யானை ஓங்குநிலை கரும்பொடு கதிர் மிடைந்த யாத்த வயல் விழை இன்குழகு உண்ணாது நுதல் துடைத்து அயில் நுனை மறுப்பின் தம் கையிடை கொண்டென கவைமுள் கருவியின் வடமொழி பயிற்றி கல்லா இளைஞர் கவளம் கைப்ப army of pachyderms in the camp. In the neat streets with thatched roofs, all the junctions stood to protect. Small-eyed pachyderms with oozing must, fields with tall canes bundled with red paddy, unbeaten by them, untouched with their trunks that wipe their foreheads between their tusks. The mahouts with goats tucked at their waistline, who speak some northern tongue unknown, their juvenile sand straining, feed huge rice balls. The poet describes a scene from the battle camp. He says that the camp would resemble a small town with neat streets and tents erected of wild grass and bamboo. On one side, there would be mounds of paddy and sugar canes. On the other side, at the junction of the streets, one can find huge elephants, trained to battle, standing with their mahouts. These elephants would be oozing with must, yet they would stay calm because of the control of the mahouts. The mahouts would be having sharp goads in their belts, and the poet says that the mahouts would speak a language, strange language of the north. They would be helped by young boys who would feed the elephants huge bowls of cooked millets and rice. பாசறையில் வீரர்களின் அரண்கள். கல் தோய்த்து உடுத்த படிவப் பார்ப்பான், முக்கோல் அசைநிலை கடுப்ப நற்போர், நற்போர் ஓடா வல்வில் தூணி நாற்றி, கூடம் குத்தி கயிறு வாங்கு இருக்கை, பூந்தலை குந்தம் குத்தி கிடுகு நிறைத்து, வாங்குவில் அரணம் அரணமாக, forests of the battle camps. Like the washed attire of the Brahmin in penance, hung on the tripod bravest front, not escaped, with fastened bow and arrows in quiver, the tents raised on spearheads so sharp and ropes tied, shields and patterned bows lined up, as the forests serve as forts. The poet describes the battle camp which is set in the deep forest. He says that the soldiers would have pitched huge tents using sharp spears and thick ropes. The tents would be made of fabric that was as clean as the attire of a Brahmin who washes his clothes to be worn before his prayers. The poet says that these were brave men who never missed a single battlefield. They never abandoned their fellow soldiers or their brave king. The poet explains how the tents would have neatly piled spears and arrows and bows stocked up and ready to be used. The soldiers would bravely stay unarmed since they knew that the forest guarded them from possible harm. பாசறையில் மன்னனுக்கு தனி இடம். வேறுபல் பெரும்படை நாப்பன் வேறு ஓர் நெடுங்கால் கண்டம் கோலி அகம் நேர்ப்பு, king's den in the camp. In yet another huge battlefront, in yet another place, tall spears hold screens around, in it stays put. The poet takes us to the royal tent. He shows us where the king's tent is pitched up, in a clearing far away from that of the soldiers, as a special tent is put up for the king. His tent is pitched up with several sharp spears and several curtains that serve as sections within the tent. We are going to meet the king and learn how he feels about the absence of his lady by his side. Let us move further into the poem and see how the king feels. மன்னனின் இருப்பிடத்தில் விளக்கேற்றும் பெண்கள். குறுந்தொடி முன்கை கூந்தல் அம்சிறப்புறத்து, இரவு பகல் செய்யும் தின்பிடியோள் வாழ், விரவு வரி கச்சின் பூண்ட மங்கையர், நெய் உமிழ் சுரையர் நெடுந்திரி கொழியே, கையமை விளக்கம் நந்துதொரும் மாட்ட. Ladies light the lamps in the king's den. Slender waist beauties with long hair curtain small back, dazzling sword that brightens dusk like noon, fastened to the dames' waistbands, holding fragrant oil-filled mugs to light the tall lamps bright, lighted again as the flame dimmed and faded. The poet explains how the women soldiers took care of lighting the tall lamps in the king's tent. The women wore thin bangles and had long hair that reached the small of their backs. They had bright and sharp swords tied in their belts or waistbands, and they had huge mugs with narrow mouths. These mugs had oil that was so sweet smelling. The lamps in the king's tents was tall and had beautifully crafted women figurine holding the cup of the lamp. This is called Pavai Vilakku, where Pavai means woman and Vilakku means lamp. The women in charge of lighting these lamps stood by the side and constantly relighted the lamps again and again. பாசறையில் காவலாளர். நெடுநா ஓன் மணிநிழத்திய நெடுநாள், அதிரல் பூத்த ஆடு கொடிப்படார், சிதர்வரல் அசைவடிக்கு அசைவந்தாங்கு, துகில் முடித்து போர்த்த தூங்கல் ஓங்க நடை பெருமூதாளர் ஏமம் சூழ soldiers in the camp. Midnight, when the long-tongued bells sleep, the shivering while jewel-wined jasmines that swerve with the swerving damp breeze, turbans on head, body wrapped in shawls, briskly walking senior soldiers who tirelessly protect. The poet takes us into the scene of action. It is the middle of the night. The bells tied to the tent posts are still and do not make any sound, and there is a slight wet breeze in the air. The wild jasmine bushes and other creepers sway in the breeze. The poet says that there is a slight wetness in the air. It is obvious because we already noted that Mullai land is known for its sudden spells of rain, and there is always constant dampness. It is such a cool night, and the big tent is protected by brisk and vigilant soldiers who are the senior-most and experienced of the entire army. நாழிகை கணக்கர் பொழுது அளந்து அறியும் பொய்யா மாக்கள் தொழுது காண்கையர் தோன்ற வாழ்த்தி எரிநீர் வையகம் வெளிய செல்வோய் நின் குறுநீர் கண்ணல் இணைத்து என்று இசைப்ப. The timekeeper. People with impeccable knowledge of time praise and hail the king with their hands folded. You who has set sail to conquer the seas of the world, thou clock shows, this time they speak. Here is an interesting information. People might have heard this word narigai quite often, which is confused with normal time. Actually, it is not so. Here is a detailed account of narigai and its equivalents. One narigai is equal to 24 minutes, and 2.5 narigai is actually 60 minutes or an hour, and 3.75 narigaigal is equal to 1 muhurtam, which is actually 90 minutes or approximately 1.5 hours. 60 narigai is equivalent to 8 jamam, which is or 2 பொழுதுகள், as they say in ancient Tamil. It is actually 1 day or the entire 24 hours. These are few of the important units of time used 3,000 years ago or even before that by ancient South Indian people. They used shadows, their measurements, position of sun, moon and stars to determine the time accurately. There were other techniques like kurunir kannal or water clock, புல்லை நிறுத்தி அளந்து அறிதல், weed grass technique, விரல் நிழலால் நாழிகை அறிதல், finger shadow clocks, and so on. Here in Mullai Paatu, the poet mentions the water clock technique, kurunir kannal, which the timekeeper uses. Ancient times had kings and queens appoint wise men or women who were experts in astronomy and astrology. They were highly talented and accurate all the time. In this case too, the king had his timekeeper in the battle camp. The timekeeper kept the king informed of accurate time to perform important tasks. In this poem is the water clock technique that the timekeeper used. Let us move ahead with the poem. மன்னன் இருப்பிடத்தில் யவனர் மத்திகை வழைய மறிந்து வீங்கு செறிவுடை மெய்ப்பை புக்க வேறுவரும் தோற்றத்து வலிப்புணர் யாக்கை வன்கண் யவனர் புலித்தொடர் விட்ட புனைமான் நல் இல் திருமணி விளக்கம் காட்டி. Greek at the king's place. Horsewhip tethered to the tightly clad cloth, once with shirts and stature so frightening. Strong and fearsome Greeks whose homes bore thick linked chains that held lamps with pearly flames. மன்னனின் பள்ளி அறையில் மிலேச்சியர் திஞ்ஞான் எழினி வாங்கிய ஈரரை பள்ளியுள் உடம்பின் உரைக்கும் உரையா நாவின் படம்புகு மிலேச்சர் உளையர் ஆக. Turks as personal guards to the king. Thick ropes bearing screens to separate the royal bed, sound in signs but sands from tongue, collared shirt on the robust Turks who guard. These two stanzas might astonish everybody. Our ancient kings and queens had people from foreign lands to work as guards and personal assistants. Here the poet mentions that the king, whose name is not mentioned, had Turks and Greeks as helpers and personal guards. This was the habit of several kings of the past. This also proves that our kings and queens had traveled far and wide. They had conquered several lands and knew more than anybody else did. We shall continue with the poem. பாசறையில் மன்னனின் மனநிலை மண்டு அமர் நசையொடு கண்படை பெறாது எடுத்து எரிய கம்பாய்தலின் புன்கூர்ந்து பிடிகணம் மறந்த வேழம் வேழத்து பாம்பு பதைப்பன்ன பருக்கை துமியத் தேம்பாய் கண்ணி நல் வலம் திருத்தி சோறுவாய்த்து ஒளிந்தோர் உள்ளியம் தோல் துமிப்பு வைனுனை பகழி மூழ்களின் செவிசாய்த்து உண்ணாது உயங்கும் மா சிந்தித்தும் ஒரு கை பள்ளியோற்றே ஒரு கை முடியோடு கடகம் சேர்த்தி நெடிது நினைந்து the state of the stately. Sunk deep in war thoughts, not a wink of sleep, the sharp spear thrown, scathing and scarring male elephants forget their counterparts, with trunks huge as pythons cut off. Nectary glory and victory brought to Vanji. Thinking of those who died bravely, physic unguarded through several shields, of the wounded mares that refused feed, lost deep in thoughts with a hand on cord, another around his stately head long into night. We have a king who is truly devoted towards his subjects. The battle had just got over. Several of the soldiers were wounded, few even died as heroes. There were elephants that were severely injured, few had even lost their trunks. The horses that raced to the commands of the riders were deeply wounded. The pain and agony did not let them graze in peace. The images of the past battle, wounded and dead soldiers, wounded animals, their sounds of pain, the victory that was surely glorious nevertheless, all muddled in the king's mind. He was worried, happy, agonized all at the same time. வெற்றிக்கு பின் பாசறையில் மன்னன் பகைவர் கட்டிய படைக்கோள் நோன் விரல் நகைத்தாள் கண்ணி நல்வலம் திருத்தி அரசு இருந்த பணிக்கும் முரசு முழங்கு பாசறை இன்துயில் வதியுனன். King at the camp post victory. The fingers that held the slaying sword that brought dazzling victory to his land. Victory war drums that send shivers in the foes as he rests his royal self. The poet describes how the king sleeps in his battle camp after bringing victory to his land. The skillful sword had defeated his enemies. The war drum beaten at his camp echoed around, making his enemies tremble. King slept peacefully with the satisfaction of having brought victory. Ah, typical man. When the lady is distressed about his absence, the man sleeps peacefully, thinking of his battle results. Or is it so? We are going to unravel more emotions as we bring the poem to a close. Mullai Paatu. The poem talks about an age-old concept, Talaivan Talaivi Piridal, which is the pain of separation. தலைவனை காணாது வருந்தும் தலைவியின் நிலை காணாள் துயர் உழந்து நெஞ்சை ஆற்றுப்படுத்த நிறைதவு புலம்பொடு நீடு நினைந்து தேற்றியும் ஓடுவளை திருந்தியும் மையல் கொண்டும் ஒய்யென உயர்த்தும் ஏவுரு மங்கையின் நடுங்கி இழை நெகிழ்ந்து பாவை விளக்கின் பருவுச் சுடர் அழல இடம் சிறந்து உயரிய எழுநிலை மாடத்து முடங்கு இறை சொரித்தரும் மாத்திரள் அருவி இன்பல் இமிழிசை ஓர்பணல் கிடந்தோள் அஞ்செவி நிறைய ஆலின. Her pain of separation, like one that's never seen grieved, to guide her heart which was sent with him, gloomy, lonely, long in thoughts, consoled, wrists unbangled, gripped with fears unknown, heaving heavy sighs, quivering like a peacock pierced, jewels hanging loose, lamp aglow constantly thick. In the 7-storied palace of the royal clan, from the mouths of river that fall as crashing cascade, sounds she did hear from far away, that her pretty ears filled with. It is said that when a person is deeply caught in the whirlpool of love, one would develop keener senses surrounding their counterparts. Emotions would be in a turmoil, there would be ebbs and flows of reactions, and the person would be extra alert while expecting the other person's presence. Here in the poem, the lady or the queen is found in the grand palace which has 7 floors. The lady feels lonely despite people buzzing around all the time. She is caught in a whirlpool of emotions. She simply sighs and gets lost in thoughts often. She trembles imagining terrible events. Her garments and jewels hang loosely on her. This is because she wouldn't have had proper food or rest after her beloved left for the battlefront. The poet compares the state of the lady to a peacock that is hunted. She constantly stares at the lamps lighted in the palace, and suddenly, like the wild river gushing out from the mountain top, she is able to hear a din. Somewhere far away, she is able to sense a huge roar of cheers and drum beats. Her ears sharpen their senses and prepare her for a surprise. போரில் வெற்றி பெற்று தலைவன் வருதல், வென்று பிறர் வேண்டுபுலம் கவர்ந்து ஈண்டு பெருந்தானையோடு விசயம் வெல் கொடி உயரி வலநேர்ப்பு வயிறும் வளையும் ஆர்ப்ப. The return of the victorious hero. After victory over several desired lands, coveted with his grand army, carrying raised high flags, the victory announcing, long cornets and conches sounded and boomed. To soothe the anguish of the lady, the king arrives grandly after winning over the battle. His bravery and triumph is celebrated by his troops, who march towards the capital with their flags raised. And long cornets, there is a long and curved wind instrument, is blown along with conches announcing his winning and his arrival. கார்பருவத்தில் முல்லை நிலம் ஐர செறி இலை காயா அஞ்சனம் மலர முறியினர் கொன்றை நன்பொன் கால கோடல் குவிமுகை அங்கை அவிழ தோடு ஆர் தோன்றி குருதி பூப்ப கானம் நந்திய செந்நில பெருவழி வானம் வாய்த்த வாங்கு கதிர் வரகின் திரிமறுப்பு இரலையொடு மடமான் உகள எதிர்செல் வெண்மழை பொழியும் திங்களில். Mullai lands monsoon. The fine soil holding knit-leaved kaya blooming like the liners, like golden showers, cassia sprinkles as wide as opening palm white glory flowers. Scarlet like blood the red lilies too, the evergreen forests of the Mullai land. Bearing the bent harvests of monsoons, the spiral horn stacks skip with doors in wild, in the month where even white clouds shower. The poet lists out various flowers that are popular in the rainy Mullai land. He says that even nature seemed to celebrate the king's success in the battlefield. Just before his arrival, the bushes and creepers bearing several flowers as a result of their ever wet red soil are fully bloomed. He mentions the following flowers: Kaya, which is ironwood tree flower; Kondrai, which are cassia flowers; Kodal or Venkandal, white glory lily; and Singandal refers to red Malabar lily. The forest of Mullai land is full of trees and bushes. They are lush because of constant rains. It is where the stags and deers freely roam about without fearing any predators or hunters. The land is never failed by the monsoons, and the poet says that one should not be fooled by the white fluffy clouds, because even they would definitely bring rains as it was the monsoon season. வந்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றது அரசனின் தேர், முதிர்காய் வள்ளியங்காடு பிறக்கொழிய துணைப்பறி துறக்கும் செலவினர், வினை விளங்கு நெடுந்தேர் பூண்டமாவே. The king's chariot arrives. Fields of mature tubers crushed behind, speeding horses whipped to speed up more. Like in the battle, the horses fasten, neighed. In the peak of monsoon season, in a speeding chariot pulled by strong and brave horses, the king arrives. The speed of the chariot is such that the wild plants in the fields are completely destroyed under its wheels. The charioteer whips the already speeding horses to run faster, and since the horses are battle trained, they understand the urgency of the master and they bid accordingly. The poet closes the poem with a grand arrival of the king. We can only imagine the rest. The overwhelmed lady shedding her distress, the joyful reunion of the king with his queen, and the grand celebrations that follow. Thank you so much for the love and support you render us. Do join hands with us to relive our ancient texts. My thanks to Mr. Praveen Mohan for the opportunity. Catch you all soon with yet another masterpiece from the past. Thank you.